Hello, truth seekers and light workers and light bearers and truth bearers and truth lighters, all of that. Today, I'm going to tell you a story. I'm going to tell you 4 stories. And anyone who doesn't know what I'm doing, that's Max Bygraves from years ago. Okay? I'm going to tell you 4 stories, all about what's happening today. We're living in very, very strange times, like bizarre times. And there's such a lot that's happening that's hard to explain. There's such a lot of different thoughts and behaviours that are hard to explain. It's almost like we're living outside of watching a tornado happening. And we are kind of observers of it, asking ourselves, what on earth is going on in there? And so I thought it would be nice to offer you some little stories, because you can learn so much from a story, can't you? I know I have. And they might help just to explain where we are. That's all. Where we are. I'm not offering solutions. I'm just explaining where we are. One of the issues that we have is that we are surrounded by people, and lots of people in our own family, who are still asleep. People who are sleeping. And we desperately want to wake them up, don't we? We really want to wake them up. And it's hard when we see them doing things that we wouldn't do, thinking things that we wouldn't think, and believing things that we wouldn't believe. It's very tough for us. And so it's like the story of the man who had a daughter in olden times in the village. In those times, daughters, women, didn't do anything except get married to rich men. It was the job of the father of the family to try and get the woman married off to somebody who had a bit of money, and then you secured that kind of the lineage. The problem was that the man's daughter was really ugly. She was the ugliest woman in the village. As the expression goes, she had a face like a cobbler's thumb. Okay? And the father knew that he was never in a million years going to get her married off. What was he going to do? He was going to be lumbered with her all of his life. But then one day, a blind man moved into the village, and the father saw his opportunity, and so he arranged for his daughter to marry the blind man, because he knew that nobody was going to marry you, but a blind man would, because he wouldn't know how ugly she was. And so the man married his daughter. The father was happy. The blind man wasn't particularly rich, but he lived comfortably. And so everything was resolved. Except one day, the surgeon moved into the village. A surgeon who was renowned for returning people's sight to them. And he was acclaimed. And suddenly everyone was talking about it. Hey, perhaps he could bring back the sight of the blind man. And so the father, knowing that if the blind man got his sight back, he would get divorced immediately. He wouldn't be able to live with this woman. So ugly was she, that he paid somebody to make sure that the surgeon was disposed of, gone. And so the man never ever got his sight back, and he stayed married to the woman for the rest of his days. And so from there, the phrase, the little catchphrase that people would use was always, if your wife is really ugly, it's better that you stay blind. When you've got a really ugly wife, it's much better that you just stay blind. And that, I believe, is where we are at the moment. The people who have woken up, what did you wake up to? you woke up to an awful lot of horror. You woke up and realized that the being that you had been sharing your life with was actually a monster, was actually ugly. Fugly, I think they call it, don't they? And it's awful. Waking up is tough. There's a very high price to waking up, as one of my clients says. There's a very high price to waking up. Now, that doesn't mean that waking up is bad. Waking up is good. Waking up, good. Waking up is good. However, at the moment, it's not for everyone. And I believe that before we can get everybody else awakened, or before everybody else should awake, I think we need to have other things in place. I think we need to have more lights on the pathway. We are those who are placing the lights, the candles on the pathway for people to see. And I believe that in 2020 this is going to be even more so, that there are lots of things going to be put into place in readiness for when the people wake up and realize that their wife is ugly. Okay? So, don't worry. For the moment, it's better that they remain blind. For the moment. Okay. Now, we live in a world of falsehood, of lies, of deception, of meaningless words. When I hear politicians talk, and I've always felt this way, I feel like a vacuum inside of me. I feel empty. When I hear the words, they do not fill me. They drain me. This empty rhetoric that I hear. So, this king of one of the islands in the Pacific, well, he organized a banquet in celebration of a work that a man had done on the island. And so he organized a celebration, and the idea was to give thanks to this man. So during the celebration, there was loads of food and wine and dancing and singing. Then finally, the moment came in the night when it was time to give thanks to the man. Everything became silent. And the king, rather than standing up, ushered in a professional thanksgiver. And the professional thanksgiver, who had been paid specifically to do the job, give a tremendous speech of thanks, thanking the man from all angles in very beautiful ways, using very beautiful words. Well, at the end, the man, feeling extremely grateful for all of this attention, stood up in readiness to return the thanks. And the king said, sit down. Look, we have paid somebody specifically to come in and give thanks on your behalf. On this island, we believe that public speaking should be left to the professionals and shouldn't be in the hands of the amateurs. Okay? And isn't that where we are now? Isn't that where we are today? Where it's very difficult to speak your truth. It's very difficult to say what you want to say. It almost seems as though there are other people far wiser and far more professional who can speak on your behalf, who speak for you. But really, is there any authenticity in that? Where's our own authenticity? Where is humankind's own ability to speak for itself these days? It seems to be something that's missing, and something that will return. And it'll be like a breath of fresh air when we finally are allowed to speak for ourselves. Okay, so that brings me to the next story of, well, there's an awful lot of crap being disseminated. A lot of mistruths, untruths, a lot of stories, and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of people who are telling their stories know that these stories are not true. Lots of people know that what they are telling us is untrue. Or do they? Or is there some kind of mystical land in between? So, one day this priest is in his room and he's working on his Sunday speech, his Sunday gospel that he's going to give. And some children are playing football outside of his window. Okay, this is in the olden times, and he was getting very, very vexed, very angry, because he couldn't concentrate on his sermon. That's the word he was doing, the sermon. And so he had an idea. So he went to the window and he said, Children, I've just heard, if you go down to the river, there's a monster down by the river, and it's breathing fire out of its mouth and nose. If you run now, you'll see it. You've got to go. Well, of course, the children dropped the ball immediately, and off they ran. And the priest, very, very happy with himself, continued to work on his sermon. But it was only some 5 minutes later that he heard a commotion outside of the window, and when he looked, he saw that the whole village was running down toward the river. And he shouted out, What are you all doing? And they said, Haven't you heard? There's a monster down by the river, a horrible, terrifying monster that's breathing smoke and fire out of its nose and mouth. Well, the priest, hearing that, put his coat and shoes on and ran out of his house and joined the mob running down to the river. And as he ran down, he thought to himself, I know I invented this story, but who's to say that it isn't true? And I think maybe that's where we are. You know, if you say a lie enough times, it converts into truth. And that can be in many different ways, because we are creators. And so we can create through intention. And so, you know, that's why they say, be careful of what you wish for. Be careful, because you might just get it. So quite where the truth lies anymore, I don't know. Many people are running down to the river, and many people who know fine well that this is a farce are still running down to the river. Bizarre, isn't it? Bizarre. So this brings me to my last story, and I love this story. This explains exactly what we are seeing today in the medical world and in the world of the professional, the expert. Let's leave it to the experts. Let's follow the science. Let's follow the science and leave it to the experts. The experts know far better than you. Are you an expert? Then shut your mouth. Yeah? So, this man dies. Okay? He dies, and it wasn't expected. And so his friends have got him in a coffin, and they're carrying him to the graveyard. So they take him to the graveyard and they place a coffin down, and they're preparing the hole in readiness to put him into the hole to bury him. And they're very sad. And just as they're about to grab the coffin to put it in the hole, there's a knock on the lid. Well, they're stunned. So they get a screwdriver and they take the screws out and they lift the lid up, and the guy's there with his eyes open. And the guy says, "What are you doing?" And they said, "Well, John, you're dead." And John said, but I can't be dead. I'm alive now. I think I had something happen to me, but I'm all right now. Well, there was a silence, and they all looked at one another. And finally, one of the friends spoke and said, "John, the doctors have said that you died. The priest has read you your last rites, and the coroner has signed the death certificate. If all of the experts say that you're dead, then I think you really need to accept that you are dead." And John looked at them and said, "Well, if the experts are saying it, then I have to be." And so they dutifully put the lid back on, and they screwed the screws in, and they buried him. And that was the end of John. And I wonder how many people have found themselves in that position, that when the experts tell you, then who are we to question, even when it's patently obvious that there's something wrong with the image, there's something wrong with the expert opinion. And so, that's where we find ourselves in this world today. What does that mean? Does it mean that all is lost? Does that mean that there's no hope? No, absolutely not. I was just talking to somebody earlier about crisis. When we go through crisis, and when I talk about crisis, it can be a health crisis, it can be a life crisis, it can be an emotional crisis. But I'm going to use the example of a child. When a child gets a health crisis, and often they do, they'll get an extreme fever where it's in the hundreds, and the parents are terrified. The child's kind of seeing visions. I know it happened to me. Happened to a lot of people that I know. When they were kids, we would see visions. You would have such a high temperature, you would be hallucinating. It was really good. I enjoyed it. But what lots and lots and lots of parents report is after the crisis, once the crisis has abated, they notice a big shift in their children's ability, either physically or mentally. Children suddenly have more speech capabilities, or they have a growth spurt. Okay? And that's because we actually thrive in crisis. Crisis is the catalyst for change and for growth. Always has been, always will be. When we hit an emotional rock bottom, then the next thing that happens to us is we come up again. All right, we can stay along the bottom for a good while, eh? We can. But we always end up coming up. Every crisis that we have has a rebound. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. And so we are going through crisis at the moment. But I know that we will rebound from this. We will come out of this stronger, wiser, more capable, and in control so much more of our own personal power. We, humankind, have the power. We have the power. We just don't know it yet. And I'm talking about we. I know you do. I'm talking about we as a collective we. We just don't know the power that we have. We've been lied to. We've been told by experts that we don't have the power. I've got the power. We've got the power. We've got the numbers. And we know what we can do to actually change the world. All that we need to do is move our feet. We move our feet and move our attention. That's all. Every big company in the world, every big corporation in the world, the big tech, every single thing that is medicine that is controlling us at the moment is only controlling us because of our consent. We consent. And I read something very interesting, and it reminded me. Consent can be spoken, but there's also an unspoken consent. That is when you say nothing, when you remain silent, when you say, oh, they're doing that, but what can you do? They're doing that, but well, how can we change things? Okay? That is consent. When you don't speak out, when you don't say no. We can change everything by saying a resounding no in very, very large numbers. And that day's going to come. That day's going to come. You know, I mentioned that in January, I think, between December and January, 100 million people moved away from WhatsApp and moved to Telegram. Okay? That can make or break a business. Imagine 3 billion people refusing to accept the medication that they're given, looking for an alternative. Imagine 3 billion people refusing to vote. Imagine 3 billion, 4 billion people choosing not to buy products that are supplied by bad companies. Every single thing that is controlling us at the moment is being controlled through our consent, through our saying it's okay. We accept it by not saying anything. And the day will come the day, when we will no longer accept. And I feel that. I feel it growing and growing. And look, we've got the blind man who's married to the ugly daughter. That blind man at some point will wake up. For the moment, maybe it's better that he doesn't. But there'll come a time when he has to wake up. He has to get his sight back. Okay? And then he'll discover how ugly she is. And when I say she, I'm talking about, what do you want to call it? Babylon the Great? Whatever you want to call it. The harlot. And everything will change. So what we have to do, our job now, is to lay candles on the path. I was on the weekend retreat, and it was dark outside and the toilet was far away, and so they laid candles on the path so that when you came out you just needed to follow the candles. You couldn't see a thing, but all you could do is follow the candles. That's our job. That's who we are. We are the light bearers. We have to lay candles out. We need to shine light on the path, because when those people wake up, Jesus, they're going to need some light. They're going to need to know where to go. They're going to be lost, and they're going to be saying, get me away from this ugly bitch. And we'll already be up the path. We'll already be along the way, putting lights along the way, saying, this way, this way. Okay? So, there you are. I hope you enjoyed that. A little bit different. And I'll see you on Monday. Have a lovely weekend. Bye-bye.